And again, welcome to the virtual M Room. My name is Clara Bowie. I am the Associate Director for the Office of Multicultural Affairs. And we are so excited to have this presentation today and welcome our undergraduate student, Benjamin Santos. Always excited to have our students come in and share their presentations, their thoughts, and this one is going to be a great one. So looking forward to this. The title of the presentation is The Intersection of Contact Sports, Domestic Violence, and Hip Hop, How Poverty Deteriorates Human Connections. And so we'll turn it over to Ben, and he can guide us through this conversation. Welcome, Ben, and thanks for joining us.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, guys. So like Clara just said, the title of my presentation is The Intersection of Contact Sports, Domestic Violence, and Hip Hop, How Poverty Deteriorates Human Connection. So I'll start off with some context. Let's see. So if we look at 2019 Pew Research data, you see that the percentage of Black children living in poverty was more than 3 times higher than that of white children. That number is super significant because it's 26.4%. And the number for white people, or white children more specifically, hasn't changed since 1976. And since 1976, white children have not had a percentage of poverty higher than 10. It's 2020 and Black people are still at 26.4. That's not a coincidence. In 2019, 70% of the athletes that played basketball were Black. And, or not basketball, but NFL athletes in total, like every single person on the court. However, only 9% of team managers were Black and 0% were presidents. The only time that changed was in 2020, when someone named Jason Wright became the first president ever to lead a team that was Black in the NFL in all of their history, and they've been here for a long time. That means that out of 2/3, Black people make up 2/3 of everyone in the NFL. They were not in any president position for the entire history of the organization. They're the ones that make decisions on who gets to kneel and who doesn't. Does the team have a decision on how they protest, how they perform activism? It was being decided by white people for the entire history of the program. So what this shows is that there's a clear caste system in the NFL where the people at the bottom, that are the ones that are entertaining, the ones generating the revenue, have to just perform every single day. And if you get a knee injury, they get to terminate your salary. The NFL is one of the only major sports leagues that does that. The NBA doesn't do that. The MLB doesn't do that. So it's, if you don't perform tonight, you don't get paid tonight. So I continue. So if we look at the money, the NFL isn't making chump change. Like, they're generating 15 billion, and that's in 2018. And they only give 17 million to what we know is clearly like head trauma, sustained mental health issues for the rest of people's lives, for something that people only do for about 10 years, if they're lucky. So like I said before, you're risking your life, risking your mental health, risking your brain's health, your children's health, everybody in your family, just to get terminated if you get a simple knee injury. So this is what the potential is for a lot of people that engage in contact sports, specifically like the NFL. Someone who's pretty famous and a lot of you may have heard about before is Aaron Hernandez. He became famous for something related to violent crime. And if we look at his brain, which had the most severe experience of CTE of anyone ever found in his age. I'll get to this later on, but Aaron Hernandez was 27 when he died, and his brain resembled the brain of someone who was 40, in their late 40s. He stopped playing basketball football when he was 23, though. So he got arrested when he was 23. So I actually changed that from 27 to 23. Imagine us, like 1 year out of college, having the same brain of someone who's in their late 40s. Just because they played a sport, right? So we look at his hippocampus. It plays a major role in memory. It had shrunk. We look at his fornix, which contributes to memory function. It had atrophied. The frontal lobe, which is responsible for problem solving, judgment, impulse control, and social behavior, had been pockmarked. That's basically like, if you guys ever see rocks when like a lot of water passes by them through thousands of years, they have these little like craters in them. And that's exactly what was happening to his brain. His brain was creating many little craters from being knocked in the head so many times. The amygdala, which produces emotional regulation, emotional behavior, fear, anxiety, had been severely affected. This one is super important because this is kind of like at the crux of what I'm arguing. Like, we're making people not be able to function properly as human beings have been for thousands of years because we want to watch them throw a ball and play a game and make us laugh and make us like hype. So the temporal lobes, which process sights, sounds, show significant damage. That's super important. Like, imagine waking up and not having sight or having debilitated sight, whatever the case may be. So according to Anne McKee, she's the one that is the head of the CTE Center at Boston University. She said that his brain resembled the brain of someone who was in their late 40s. Again, I remind you, he stopped playing football when he was 23. That's 1 year out of college. And one study showed that out of 111 former NFL players, 110 had CTE. This isn't like random. This isn't 1 out of 10. This isn't even 5 out of 10. This is a study that was performed recently that shows that only one person out of the 100 plus that they examined didn't have CTE. And this is important to mention that I didn't want to write this down because part of my argument is that like we demonize a lot of Black men and men of color for being in these positions, probably like at a higher rate of violence, domestic violence, whatever the case may be. What Aaron Hernandez was convicted and eventually acquitted for, which means that he was found innocent after having been found guilty, is murdering 2 people. And my argument isn't to relinquish him of like responsibility for what he first was accused of and convicted for, but then later on acquitted of. But it's to say, if he did or if he didn't, he wasn't in the capacity to make a proper judgment call because our society prioritizes us destroying our bodies and us being Black people, us being people of color, just so we can make some bread. That's insanity to me. So I continue. Here's how we made the connections. If you look at the numbers, 99.8% of everyone that tries to get into the NFL won't, right? Of the 100,000 high school seniors who play football every year, only 215 will ever make the NFL. So we're making young kids play sports. This is a lifetime commitment. The reason why I put that is because it's not like you don't just wake up one day and say, oh, I'm going to play football. You have to do this from youth. We look at the numbers. A recent survey of 50,000 8th, 10th, and 12th grade students found that about 44% of Black boys play tackle football compared to 29% of white boys. There's been specific cities across the country that are predominantly white and affluent that don't even have varsity football teams because their interest has gone down so much. This is because of CTE. White parents know that it doesn't make sense to put their kids in a sport that's going to debilitate their mind for the rest of their life. So it's translated onto them. Kids don't want to play it. So in a lot of major affluent white cities in the country, they don't even have a football team anymore. It's not the same for Black and brown students. So I continue. Today, Black athletes make up nearly half of Division I college football athletes, and that's up. Like it shows like an upward trend, which is important. Like this isn't something that's gonna end like relatively soon. So I keep going. If you look at the numbers, athletes who began playing tackle football before the age of 12 have twice as much of a risk of behavioral problems later in life and 3 times as much a risk of clinical depression as athletes who began playing after 12. This is important because a lot of leagues start before kids are 12. I was playing baseball before I was 12. I was playing basketball at that same age. So I used to think that I wanted to be a professional baseball player, and I thought that I needed to do everything that I could to succeed. So these are numbers that are irreversible. You can't go back in time and stop get knocked in your head every single day at the age of 11 years old. It's something that's almost set in stone. So a separate study from the Wake Forest University found that boys who played just 1 season of tackle football between the ages of 8 and 13 had diminished functions in part of their brain. So it's not even like every single kid is trying to be the next like Aaron Hernandez or anyone else in the NFL. Like even playing one season could have detrimental effects for the rest of your life. So I continue. Black people are the highest risk of suffering from mental health defects caused by football in middle school, high school, college, and the professional level. All these numbers point to that. The NFL runs a website and an app for kids specifically tailored to children that has more than 3 million registered users. That's not an insignificant amount of number, right? Like if someone gave me $3 million right now, I'd take it. That's a lot of kids. So I continue. It's funded and they brand fitness and they brand it as like a healthy sport, which it's not. They have a lot of programs, as you see, in 73,000 schools. Just if there's 100 kids in that school, do the math. There's so many kids that are being impacted and told, oh, this is something that's going to benefit you. This is something that's going to push your life forward, but it's really not. Because as I've shown before, all you need is to get one injury and you're done. They don't have to pay you anymore. So low-income Black boys are more likely than low-income white boys to live in neighborhoods where persistent poverty exists, violence, and trauma. Like I'm one of those people. I grew up in the most dangerous hood in New York City. We had so many murders last year. And even the year before that, like a lot of people think that we are just supposed to like deal with this and like move on. A lot of people don't have sympathy for those that are rich, like these football players. Like sometimes I'm guilty of that. But at the end of the day, we have to realize that they're not always rich. Like they might just lose it in an instant. And that's by design. This is the only league that does that. The only major professional league that does that. And 70% of its players are Black. That's not a coincidence. Yeah.
I feel like you threw a lot of information, a lot of stats to that. So before you move on, can we just open it up and ask folks what are their reactions
Of
to
course.
sort of what they've seen so far?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question, because for me, it confirms a lot of what I even think about when thinking about my young son and the sports that he plays. And you're right, it's having that information and understanding the impacts. And so being able to have that discussion, with my partner in how are we going to, give this opportunity to our children to select sports, and then what are the consequences for the sports that they do select. And so he didn't go with football, he went with soccer, and loves basketball as well. But I'm really glad that you're pointing out these statistics and helping us understand the trauma that comes from these contact sports.
I have a comment. Can everybody hear me? I just want to add that I find it interesting when professional athletes speak out, and a lot of professional football players will say they don't want their children playing football. So that's always very interesting to hear.
So I wanted to go back to the point. Excuse me. So I want to go back to the point you made about how most affluent white states or cities don't have football teams because like parents know that if they were to put their kids in it, the benefit isn't really that much. But as opposed to Black parents, as soon as their child comes of age, they're like, yo, you need to get into some type of sport. I don't care what it is. And they don't think about the effects that could have on their mental health, their physical health, and stuff like that. But they mostly care about the money because that's what they need. So if you really think about it, most things are designed as a way to just prevent Black people from advancing as a race. And yeah.
Amen. Yeah, I can't say anything else besides that. Yeah, I completely agree. Like, that's the whole crux of my argument here is that for us, it might be a way out. But for white students, it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm going to go to college not to play sports. I'm going to just go there and get a degree, work at my daddy's company, or not even that. Maybe that's a stereotype. Like, it could just be as simple as I'm going to go get a degree and I'm going to have 30% more of an opportunity to get a job over a Black person because my name doesn't look like something that an a recruiter might think is unprofessional or whatever the case may be. Studies from the 1990s up until today have shown that if you have a Black sounding name, whatever that means, that you have 30% less of a chance to get a job. It's not a coincidence that 0% in 2020 of team managers in the NFL were Black, and now one person is Black. So thank you for that point.
Matt,
Ben, we do have one hand raised. Jason, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Ben. I mean, this is really astonishing, information and really well delivered. I can't wait to hear more. But as you were talking about like the injuries and, the mental health aspects that can come from these injuries, I just couldn't help but also think about the intersection of what you're talking about and our for-profit medicine or medical system that denies proper medical care, not just for physical injuries, but mental health concerns to so many people. And I just think that's one of our biggest injustices in our country. And then when you're talking about our less affluent, populations being subjected to this, and then how does that also intersect with the inability to get proper medical care and mental health care if these problems definitely develop. So anyway, thank you for everything.
Thank you.
I was just going to add just our community. And when I say our, I'm speaking specifically about the African-American community working to change the narrative about the way out. Because for a while, even a community that grown up in a project, the way out was through sports, right? It wasn't until I got to college that I learned that there was more to the way out. So as I'm listening to you, I'm aware of these statistics, but I'm also thinking about the idea of like community integration and community responsibility, right? It's up to us that are here to say like, wait, there's more. Even if you don't want to go to college, there's a technical school, there are other opportunities you can venture into. Basketball, football does not only have to be the only way out. And also educating parents to not put that pressure on their kid, because usually what will happen, a kid will start playing sports, they may appear to be good, and then all effort will go into making that person the staple person in the community, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to make it, you're going to be the one to take the community to the top. And that's a lot of pressure to put on someone, not taking into account all of the health risks that are associated with it.
Thank you for that point. It actually helps me like, oh yeah, you could go, bro.
This made me think about the show All American.
Mm-hmm.
You watched it, like how he has all that pressure of making the way out, and he even went to a different school just for football to try to like make a way out and stuff. And I was like, he went back to Crenshaw and try to like make it on top from football, and he suffered injuries, and it just basically connects to that how football. Yeah.
Thank you.
We have one more hand raised in the virtual audience. John, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for this presentation. I'm finding this to be really wonderful. I'm sorry I'm not able to be there in person, and I apologize. I came in a little bit late. Did you mention LeBron? I wasn't sure if this had come up in the minutes before I arrived. Was LeBron in part of your presentation at all?
So I decided to prioritize contact sports and like.
Yeah, no. So sorry, I'll just explain that. So LeBron James played football in high school and was asked about why his children don't play high school. And, he offered a very direct and I think meaningfully intersectional response. He said that they don't need a way out of poverty, and I did. So for him, he saw that as, he was very, very sort of sanguine and had a real clarity about what football represented to him, and about the fact that this sort of, arrow forward for, these narratives that I think you're really meaningfully poking holes in, that, that's just if this is something you're going to continue researching, I thought it'd be worthwhile to surface.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I was just going to talk about how the Black community, like, we don't see like education as the way out anymore, because there's so much injustice in the education system. So it's hard to put all of your like work into education just for it not to work out. But with sports, a lot of African-American men see that as like a way of being masculine. So, a lot of men do it, a lot of people do it. And that's like the way they see themselves going out, because education is not really an option, or it's not really as good of an option to them. So.
I really like that point that you made, Ruby. So I kind of wanted to go back to the domestic violence aspect of this. So as we know, football is very physical, and like once you get into it, if you're angry at like any point in your day, you could be like, oh, I have football practice later. I could take my anger out on that. But like the moment you stop playing, or the moment something happens, your football career is over. You have no way of releasing that anger. So now you go on to whoever you have at home, or whatever way you can find to release that anger. And that's like kind of how Black men are designed to like they're just kind of forced, but not actually forced, because they still have responsibility over it. But yeah, they're like forced into being domestically violent.
Yeah, I really like that point, and it actually brings me forward into something I was going to say later on, but I'll go back and yeah. Wasn't awesome. Thank you. So even before they retire, or before like they get injured and don't get paid anymore, like you see that crucial parts of your brain, like the amygdala, are being impacted. Like that's where you have emotional regulation of your responses to things. So it's not even just like, oh, I'm gonna go to practice later on. It's like your initial instinct might not be like, yo, like let me punch my best friend in the face right now for this thing. However, you're getting paid every single day to do this. Like this is your automatic. Like practicing is meant, like practice how you play. That's something I always heard as an athlete. Practice how you play, right? So if every single day of my life I'm getting paid millions of dollars because I'm one of the greatest. Aaron Hernandez is the most severe case of CTE of someone in his age because he was one of the greatest football players, right? Like he got paid 40. He had one of the largest contracts that the Patriots had ever given out to anybody, right? He was a tight end. He got hit in the head every single play. Like that was his job. If he wasn't getting hit in the head, he wasn't playing, right? And this is something that I don't put into my piece, but the majority of the football players that are quarterbacks are white, and that's not a coincidence. The quarterback isn't supposed to get hit. If the quarterback gets hit, someone else did something wrong. That's how it works. So it's also not a coincidence that Tom Brady is the greatest player of all time. He's my favorite football player, but still, like, it's not a coincidence that every Black person's job on the court is to make sure he doesn't touch the ground. Not a coincidence. So thank you for that point. And to build on top of that, I think that that's like where the crux of my argument gets to. Like, poverty is deteriorating human connection. Like these people feel like it's a way out, and it's not just me saying this. Someone brought up how LeBron James said that like his kids don't play football because they don't have to make a way out anymore. So we're basically incentivizing people to not be human to each other anymore, just so they can make a buck. Insanity. So I continue. Here, like I kind of wanted to come back to this screen because it, and the one before actually as well, like to kind of see how many kids are playing this game. Like I'm not telling you to feel bad for adults that made their own decisions, although I am telling you to have like a more intersectional approach to how you evaluate how adults perform behaviors, specifically ones that are traumatized every single day on and off the court. One of the major issues with Aaron Hernandez and why he got to the point that he did is a culture of feeding these athletes with dope, with like drugs that numb the pain so that they keep playing. And this is a practice that's ubiquitous across the NFL. So if you get hurt, they tell you not to get off the court. So you take whatever amount of concoction of drugs that they give you, and now you don't feel anything and you keep playing. You worry about it tomorrow because we have doctors for that. However, what about 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years? They don't really care because you're not making money for them anymore. So that's why I think it's like crucial to like describe how the football team and just the league in general is a caste system, and the majority of the people in it are Black and the majority of the ones at the bottom are Black. It's kind of like our society. This is one of the most American sports that we have, so it's not a coincidence that they're replicating the same social constraints and limitations on Black people that our society is. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm so sorry for stopping you, but you mentioned something about doctors, and that just reminded me, like, if you think about it, most people in the medical field are white, and then, like you said, most of the football players are Black, and we know that what's it called? And most of the time when the football players have an injury, the doctor will sign it off and pretend that everything is okay. So like, if you really think about this, the white people, well, I don't want to, yeah, the white people are basically leading Black people into, I don't know the word or like what to say, but like, I think you guys get what I mean.
Yeah, yeah. That's actually a great point for you to bring up. I didn't put this in my proposed solutions because I wanted to keep it to 3 because I don't know if I was gonna go over time. But one of my proposed solutions for this is broader than just the NFL. It's like healthcare reform. Something super crucial to mention is that Black women, I'm sure you guys have heard this statistic before. It's like kind of like a buzz statistic these days to like show that you know what's up. But Black women die at a 3 times higher rate during pregnancy than white women. Something that might not make the news as well is that when white women get a college degree, it drops their rate of dying during childbirth dramatically to the point where it's pretty much 5 times less than Black women. So going to college for white women puts them 5 times ahead of Black women on something that is just simple, giving birth, right? And not simple to the person, but simple to modern medicine, right? Like if Black women are dying at 5 times the rate of white women when it comes to a college degree, that means that we're in slavery times. I would say that we're in slavery right now, prison industrial complex, but that's not what this is about. The point of what I'm saying is that like this is about kids at the end of the day. Like even if they don't get to the NFL, if anything, like my point is like F the NFL. Like we don't have to worry about the NFL. Like the thing is like let's restructure society in a way where like kids don't even have to get into this caste system. Like kids are just all right. It's not even school. School doesn't have to be the other alternative. Like we could get creative and think about how people do that too. So yeah.
This doesn't directly correlate to your presentation, but I still want to mention it. So when you think about, and I'm not sure if everyone is going to know, on a college admissions scandal that happened a couple of years ago that some celebrities got caught up in, but there's a reason why the sports that were in that scandal was crew, tennis, like just your sports that are often not looked at and that don't involve predominantly people of color, because it was much easier for them to fly under the radar versus playing basketball or football that is intensely monitored 24/7. So
I think this brings in another point that again, like kind of like your point isn't necessarily connected to this, but I feel like in today's society as Black people and people of color alike, we have to build a narrative so that people could care about our stories. Like it has to be a story. Like you have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there needs to be a part where you cry. There needs to be a part where like I show that I persevered and I triumphed and I made it out. Yeah, and you still might not. Like that's the point. Like a lot of us like might not be able to make it out. Of course. Yeah.
So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the amazing young people that was just speaking. They're visiting from North Star Academy in Lincoln Park High School. They drove themselves to Lehigh for a tour today. So just literally want to take a second to say thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And Ben, you are doing fantastic so far. I'm so glad that these students got
Thank you for the questions.
Yeah, I'm so glad that these students came in and saw, you know, just a sliver of what our students are able to do in our spaces. So thank you again for joining us today.
All right,
Mhm. Great, thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, so the last point that she brought up was about how like sometimes Black and brown students might fly under the radar because they're not throwing a ball super hard or they're not catching an alley-oop and dunking it like crazy. And kind of like where I was just at before was that we always feel like we have to tell a story Like it has to be a story that incentivizes other people to want to donate to us, right? Like I just recently had to do a scholarship, like thank you, like for someone, and I've been doing that since I was a kid, because since I was a kid, my mom felt like private school was the way to go, you know. But that meant that when I was in high school, I had to cut my hair to graduate because it wasn't professional, right? So we're having to endure things like this where maybe in this society where we have to create these narratives, me having to cut my hair isn't as serious as like someone being homeless or someone getting shot or whatever the case may be. But it's like, oh no, like this system of oppression that we created over here is like so great. Like if you're not in that one, like it doesn't really matter that much. So we kind of create this hierarchy even within ourselves. That's why a lot of people of color sometimes like engage in what a lot of us call like oppression Olympics, where like, oh, you don't get it because you're not this, and you don't get it because you're not that. At the end of the day, the way that capitalism is designed is if you're not at the top, you're at the bottom. It doesn't matter if you're upper middle class, lower middle class, middle class, like it doesn't matter. Like if you're not at the top, you're at the bottom, whether that means that you're a person of color, whether you're a woman that historically haven't been CEOs and companies and whatever the case may be. So again, I don't know if this was lost earlier, but a point that I wanted to make is like, this isn't just about NFL players, this is about kids, which the majority of which don't make it to the NFL. So they're destroying their lives, and how one study shows only one season can mess up your brain for the rest of your life. As a kid, that's when your brain is developing. That's when it's at its prime state. That's when you shouldn't mess with it. So I move on to some of the solutions that I've proposed enacting. And I deliberately kept them short. Again, like I said before, I wasn't sure how much time I was going to get, but I definitely didn't just want to like drop all this information and then say like, all right, like I'm piecing out. So the first one is to reform the practice procedures that incentivize drug use to perform. This is something that I've thought about where like I used to like watching football when I was a kid, and part of what made it exciting was that people were taking drugs at the advice of their medical professionals that work for the team so that they can make a better game, so they could be more exciting, so that it could look better and get better ratings. So I know that when I was a kid, like I was a product of this. However, as we see, like the NFL is putting a lot of money and resources into making me feel that way. One of the people that spoke here and asked the question, they mentioned how like Black people are almost being forced, and the person corrected themselves and they said, well, like the person still has responsibility. That's again like at the crux of my argument. Like, do you, if your amygdala is destroyed, do you, if your hippocampus, if every other part of your brain is being fundamentally rewired, are you in control of every single one of your actions? Or not even in control, just do you have the normal human response to something, given that you've been getting knocked in your head for so many years at this point? So that's the first thing that I would argue for. Another thing is annual NFL investment into research for head trauma. Like I mentioned, they generated 15 billion. They only put 17 into research. That's a drop in the bucket. So we're depending on people that are former football players that donate their brain to science once they die to be the bulk of this research, when the NFL could be doing a lot more on the preventative side. Like that's another thing. I didn't put this here, but one of the things that I want to enact is like healthcare reform, where we don't treat Black people in the same way that we did when we were testing on them today. Like a major reason why the numbers for pregnancy death rate for Black women is so high is because doctors assume that Black people's threshold is higher. Why do they assume that? Because a lot of the discoveries that we've had in medicine have stemmed from the research that they've done on Black people. And since we've been doing it for so long, there becomes a certain point where the people that they're testing on might be in a position a lot of the times during slavery, like conventional chattel slavery, where they didn't have a choice. So to like move and be pricked was almost something that became normal as an extension of all the other enslavement acts that were taking place. So healthcare reform is major, and that's a big umbrella term. Like there's a lot of other things that go into it. But again, I kept it a bit short for this. And lastly, I think this is more importantly, this is something that like I've been advocating for since I've been a freshman and even beforehand is prison reform. I think the way that we structure prison in our society is meant to section people off so that we can't see them. We can't think about them because we don't know what it looks like in there. Maybe we know someone that's in there, but you have to pay to get in contact with them. They don't have proper meals. Like, solitary confinement is one of the most inhumane things that we do. There are laws in this country that prohibit you transporting a monkey by itself, because monkeys are social creatures. Think about that. But we're putting human beings for months in a hole by themselves because like they didn't eat when they were supposed to. This is insanity, but we let it happen because it's on the periphery of society. It's not directly in front of us every single day, and that's by design. Another thing is like a focus on rehabilitation. A lot of other countries in the European Union have already been doing this for years now, where they have a focus on making sure that this person is a better person when they came out than when they came in. And it's an active approach. It's not just like, oh, let's give an adult a timeout, which is essentially what prison is right now, and hope that when they get out, this was so bad that they never want to come back in. However, if we don't attack the social structure that made someone do whatever it was that they got in there for, in a lot of cases, 40% of the wrongfully convicted are Black. That's not a coincidence. 40%. Black people are only 14% of the population. And that's me rounding up. So all of these numbers point at a reality that's like stark, a reality that should make all of us be uncomfortable and should make us want to act. And I hope that this makes you want to, whether you agree with me or disagree with me, look more into this. If you want to find points that go against it, at least you're looking and learning about what's going on, as opposed to just being a bystander, which is what a lot of us are like culprit of. Like even I am to a certain degree on things that I'm ignorant on. Like we can't all know about every single issue. However, this is an issue that affects a lot of people, specifically children, and specifically the descendants of the people that built this country, right? Harvard Law and the Capitol building are two buildings that were brick by brick built by Black people, right? So when the Capitol building gets stormed on January 6th, a lot of people will be like, oh, like America was breached. Like, Black people are angry because we built that. Our ancestors built that. Like, we're looking at that building as like, yo, like y'all had us build this, and now because you didn't like something that happened, like you're just gonna destroy everything that you stand for. Like, it shows that it's fickle. What the foundation of this country was built on is fickle. That's what January 6th shows, and that's what a lot of instances in this country show. And it's up to us, the people that originally built it, to get it back on track if ever was. So that's the end of my presentation. If anyone has any other questions or proposed solutions, I definitely love to hear them. This is all about us collectively coming together to make a solution for issues in society. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ben. That was fantastic. And we would love to open it up for additional comments, proposed solutions, as Ben mentioned, or just, chatting a little bit more, unpacking a little bit more on this topic. So we do still have some time to do that. So I'll open it up to anyone who would like to share.
I have a comment. May I share something?
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
Yeah. I saw it was about a 13-minute YouTube video. There's kind of this whistleblower guy who was a policeman in Baltimore for about 13 years. Some of you may have come across him. And one of the things he said regarding the prison industrial complex is, he said that there was pressure on the cops in Baltimore to make a lot of arrests because in the privatized prison industrial complex, there was pressure on them to get those beds filled. We got to fill those beds in the prisons. This was a ex-Baltimore cop.
Laura.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know where to find the raise hand button on Zoom, but I'm Laura Savinelli. I work at United Way right now. Prior to this, I worked in the Northampton County Department of Corrections for 7 years as the reentry coordinator. I've seen those solitary confinement units. I've seen what people's mental state is going in and coming out of them. I've seen the lack of family connection and restorative, any kind of practices or rehabilitative programs for folks there. So the more you can, share this message you have and talk about it and make people aware, there's very few people that get to see that from the inside. So I want to affirm what you're saying about that and the importance of sharing that message. So thank you. Just another thing about just for this group, in Pennsylvania, we don't have private adult jails. So we do have, they're all state run or county run. The juvenile system uses a lot of treatment providers that are contracted, that work in the community in hopes of keeping the youth in a community-based setting. And that is a mix of for-profit and nonprofit, those providers. So yeah, it's the federal system though does definitely use the for-profit providers.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Laura.
Sure.
Oh, thank you.
I wanted to add that, you talked a little bit about, how it impacts children. But once you retire, right, because you mentioned this like 10-year career, and you've earned all this money, when you have CTE, at that point, that puts you at a higher risk for early onset dementia as well. And so now you're talking to your point about the healthcare system, paying for all that treatment, paying for a home health aide. And then at the same time, you may not even be fully like cognitively there to work other jobs. So then you're now dependent on whatever you have left over. And so medical bills plus health aid plus supporting a whole family, all of that piles up. And so it's easy to imagine that, into your 40s, which, it's still pretty young, you are now living a life that puts you incredibly at a disadvantaged position, when many adults in their 40s are like at the height of their career. For many of these football players, it's deteriorating. So also additional funding for all of that as well.
Yeah. Eugene's this one.
I guess it also just like just hearing that as well, like it kind of connects back to like the recruitment of like joining like the Air Forces and like all those things, like government run things and like low income communities. Like I know that's been like a really big issue because I don't know the like specific statistic, but I do know that they tend to target like low income or like minority like communities in general. And I think that that also leads to that exact same point and kind of like the point that you're getting to as well, like in terms of like making people like kind of get out of like whatever it is that they're going through and like offering them like this dream, like, oh, if you join the Air Forces, like you'll get all these benefits and like, we'll pay you really well. And like even after, like you'll be able to like do all these great things. But it's like they don't tell you about like what happens like, with PTSD and like all those other like mental health issues that you could gain while you're there. So I think like it's really important also to just bring that up, that it's like mental health isn't really kind of considered, and even with like I think they know who they're targeting because again, as communities of color, like we don't really talk about these issues. So I think as long as they're selling you like money and that's the first thing that they do because they know what they're doing, it seems kind of manipulative basically. So I just wanted to like add that because it was like a connection that I just made.
Thank you.
So Ben, first, sorry, first wanted to thank you for your presentation and coming in and demonstrating. I talk a lot about brave spaces over safe spaces. And so demonstrating what a brave space looks like, right? To the ability to come in, to call a thing, and even being willing, as your test case, to bring up Aaron Hernandez, that, as we know, as a person has been demonized in the society. So I appreciate the bravery in your presentation. But so, I also come from these neighborhoods, right, where the rapper Notorious Big says, either you're selling crack rock or you got a wicked jump shot, right, to get out. And it speaks to the options that especially BIPOC men feel that they have to get out of poverty, which is sports, or having alternative revenue streams is a way out. But also having both lived and worked in those communities, that first stat that you have on your slides is a stat that I've talked to young males about often, right? 99.8% of young people who want to play football are not going to make it. That means 0.2 are actually going to get where everybody's trying to get to. So when we talk about it as a way out, is it really? Right? And it's so sad because then you look at some other ways out, some similar percentages when you just go across all of the major sports leagues. And then even if we talk education, that when we look at graduation rates for BIPOC students, and especially at private liberal arts schools, we are talking 30%. And so what is a way out? Becomes the question, because these, when we get to the root of them, these may not, a lot of these are seen as the only options, but the reality of it is only a very few of us get through.
I don't know if anyone else has a question, but to build on top of that point that you just made, that I didn't get to speak too much about like the intersection of hip hop into this, but I think it's all like interconnected. The trait that's valued to become a football player is aggressiveness, right? Like we are telling children, be aggressive. If anything, when I played football in high school, this was marketed to me as a way to deal with my anger. Like it was positioned as something that was beneficial for me to like treat my mental health. But at no point was I told that this is going to debilitate me for the rest of my life, right? Like I'm so glad that I ended up going into track because I had to on off season for football. Like it was a requirement for my team, and I ended up liking that better. But a lot of kids don't, or a lot of kids do both. And I feel like that's something that's crucial to mention. I don't know Aaron Hernandez like socioeconomic status. There's reports that maybe he wasn't broke, maybe he was like a bit like middle class, whatever the case may be. But let's say he was rich. The whole point is that the way that football is structured shouldn't be. We shouldn't keep forcing people or incentivizing people with all this money to perform actions like this for money. And it all comes back to capitalism. Like at the end of the day, like we want to do this for our enjoyment. These are like gladiators in a ring in Rome. So no one really cared what happened to the lions and the people that got eaten up. If anything, they wanted them to get eaten up. So I would argue that it's fairly similar today with football. Did you have a question? Or? Thank you for coming, bro.
I'm kind of going to speak more so not about myself, but my brother's experience. My brother grew up having severe anger issues, and they put him in football as an outlet. Is it playing? And they put him in football, and he ended up tackling a kid and choking him on the field. And he was applauded afterwards. They thought he did a great job, and parents went up to him and laughed with him. They thought it was hilarious. And now he's just in a new structure of similar to football. He's going into the military, but that's like something of more structure for him. That's something of better. There's more purpose in it for him, even though it's the same thing. So just to add to that point of like aggressiveness, and like they create all these different structures to give men the sense of purpose, and it's really just laying their lives down for what?
Wow. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I wanted to just go back to a thought that you had, Ben, the connection of hip hop. Can you share your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I don't have stats on this because like there's so many new rappers coming out every single day, which is great. Like it shows the power that like technology has these days to bring about other people's voices that are typically silenced in society. Nipsey Hussle has a line where he says, I knew I was a genius, but they gave me no platforms to explain it. And he goes on to describe hip hop as music that's not for entertainment. It's for the people on the slave ship, the Negro spirituals he swam across some waves with. Hip hop isn't just entertainment. Hip hop to me is a guidebook on how to survive. It's a guidebook on how to view the world in a more positive light, something that gives me motivation. And sometimes, this is just, again, my personal opinion. Like, I didn't put any stats here to back this up, but the media likes to demonize Black men. We hear a lot about Chris Brown having beat Rihanna and all of these things. I don't listen to Chris Brown, but the point is, like, there's a lot of actors that are not of color that are not being put out here on a stage to be examined on the court of public opinion. And that's not by coincidence, it's by design. So when a lot of these hip hop artists come out and we find out that, like, they had this allegation for whatever the case may be, I'm not saying let's not listen to it. Of course, we have to examine any case when someone says that something wrong is happening. That's what I'm doing right now. However, what I'm saying is that we have to be conscious of why it's typically a specific demographic of people that is being singled out for behaviors like these. When it comes to hip hop, America has a long history of making the Black man seem like a very vicious figure. Emmett Till and Trayvon Martin, Philando Castile, the list goes on, right? These people didn't have weapons. One of them was a kid, right? Something interesting that I just found out recently, Emmett Till was born 1 year before Muhammad Ali. Think about that. We had one of the greatest athletes that ever lived, and he was peers with someone that was murdered for allegedly whistling. Something that everyone probably already knows now is that the woman that said that she had been whistled at on her deathbed wanted a clear conscience to try to get into heaven, and told everyone that, oh, sorry, like, that actually didn't happen, which doesn't matter at all. Like, it really doesn't matter whether it did or didn't. The fact is that we still live in a society where it's more tantalizing to view a Black person as an aggressor. And I think that that's why a lot of hip hop artists make the rounds on the news on domestic violence issues, because it's something that, even if it's not true, hip hop artists are pop stars. They are the popular music these days. No one listens to rock, it's hip hop. And the whole point is that you're gonna watch just because you listen to his music. And you're like, oh, what did he do? You're gonna watch because it's a Black person. You want to confirm your biases. That's what these media outlets live on. That's how they make their money. That's their bread and butter. So I'm basically just arguing to be more critical. Be more critical in any instance where you're fed information on the television. Even if you read, a lot of people tell me, like, oh, I don't watch the news, I read the news. I mean, there's still bias present in that case too. So when it comes to hip hop and how it connects to everything that I'm saying, I think it's that. I think it's us being more critical of what we establish as the norm.
I just wanted to say something real quick. It connects to hip hop because, like, there's a connection between the sports and entertainment industry being heavily concentrated with the Black population. That was basically catered for only Black people to see a way out, but there's a very, like, strong racist historical context in that, where, like, a lot of Black people would be the entertainers for their masters. Then furthermore, it turned into Black people being in zoos where white people would go and see for entertainment. And it's still carried on till this day, where somebody like LeBron James was advertised on the sports magazines, and he was carrying a white woman, like, what was that gorilla? King the Ka or something, or Godzilla or something like that. He was climbing the tower and he was holding the girl and holding the basketball. And that's, like, very racist, because now you're saying that Black people are animals / gorilla or monkey or whatever you want to say. And it's still carried on till 2021. And it's probably going to still carry on because, like Ben said, 2/3 of Black people are in the NFL, and they're not even in corporate. They're athletes. So that's very problematic, because Black people are still on leashes, chains, and stuff like that, if you see it metaphorically.
Thank you. Thank you for that point.
Well, we are coming up on time here, and so I do want to be cognizant of that. But this has been incredible. Ben, thank you so much for giving us so much to think about, some great statistics to also chew on, and just an incredible topic for us to be in community with here. I want to remind folks that this is something that we really look forward to, is having our students come into the space, share their thoughts, share an incredible way to present statistics, and open our eyes to some really important societal issues that we should be talking about. So again, thank you so much to you, Ben, for being here and sharing this with us. We tried doing this hybrid mode of presenting in our M room and virtually in our virtual M room. So I appreciate you doing this flexible hybrid way of presenting, and I hope that we can continue doing that as well. For students out there, please do not hesitate to bring topics like these to the M room. Again, it is really impactful, really powerful when we have our students here. And then finally, just want to mention, join us again next week. We will be talking about some myths and folklore in different types of monsters and legends that are in different cultures. Just kind of like a little nod to Halloween and Dia de los Muertos, which is coming up as well. So join us again. And again, thank you so much, Ben, for being a part of this presentation today.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.